If today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. The prophet Jeremiah talks to us about the children of Abraham and how they had become stiff-necked and evil and had hardened their hearts, their backs to God instead of their faces. And we wonder, how can that be? Surely, as much as we know now, we know not to let that happen. The first time I'd ever seen that phrase, harden your heart, I was reading the Bible, and I have to tell you, my entire life, I had treated the Bible more like a reference book. I would look things up, or I would try to find an answer to something. And it wasn't until my 40s that I read the Bible as the Bible. And in doing so, I came across the 7th chapter of Exodus, where God tells Moses to go to Pharaoh and demand the release of his people. And he says, I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that Pharaoh would refuse. Now, I didn't know much, but I knew that we were created in the image and likeness of God. I knew that as people, as his creation, we were given free will. And so that didn't sit right with me. Where's Pharaoh's free will if God hardens his heart? But in the time since then, I've learned more. And I've come to understand God did harden Pharaoh's heart. There is no getting around that, but not in the way I thought. See, Pharaoh was the king of the greatest nation on earth. Pharaoh's desires and Pharaoh's concerns were for the world. He didn't care about Abraham's God. And so because his heart was for the world, his heart was of the world. And just like clay or mud laid out in front of the sun, it grows hard and resistant. When confronted with God's glory and Moses' demand, Pharaoh's heart grew hard and resistant because it was predisposed to. Take something so great, like an earthly king, and contrast it with something so humble, like a honeybee. The little bee does what it does because that's what it was created to do. It follows God's plan, and it goes from flower to flower. And in doing so, it pollinates and allows for the bounty of nature that we enjoy. But the bee also gives us honey and wax. And beeswax is special. In fact, the church says that the candles we light at Mass have to be majority made out of beeswax. They have to be. And what happens to that wax if you set it out in the sun? It becomes softened and malleable. It can be formed and shaped. And the bee is concerned with the things of God. The bee does what God intends it to do. Jesus was most definitely human and divine. In his divinity, he healed and he freed. And when he cast out a demon in our reading today, some of the people in the presence of God's glory had their heart become hard, and they accused him because their thoughts and their cares were for the world and not for the things of God. It's not always something that people choose to determine, I will do this. Sometimes it becomes a habit. We're given this season of Lent as a gift for repentance, for almsgiving, for prayer, for fasting. Those three things orient us toward the things of God and away from the things of the world. It's a gift. So that if we do what God has planned for us, We turn our face toward Him instead of our back. We're predisposed for His glory and for His grace. So if today you hear His voice, harden not your heart.